All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 1883 Speaker Series. My name is Mike Wozniak, and I'm the coordinator of leadership and programming here in the Student Involvement and Parent Programs Office. Each week, we invite a campus or community leader to talk about how today's student can develop their leadership skills, as well as other advice regarding personal and professional development. We hope you learn some valuable lessons in the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds. For today's speaker, please join me in welcoming the Director of Geriatric Education at UND, Dr. Jeremy Holloway.
Thank you, my good sir. I'm using this whole 20 minutes, so let's go. I am so grateful, very grateful for the people that made this possible, the founders in 1883. Also want to say thank you to President Armacost for all the work that he does. It's incredible. Thank you, Mike Wozniak, and the whole production team. It's pretty incredible. I'm talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. because just 3 weeks ago, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King and the incredible speech in front of 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial. Amazing. And also it was live. So millions of people saw Dr. King share the I Have a Dream speech. And it's just incredible that this movement related to social justice was viewed by so many people and from the Lincoln Memorial. One thing that I'm going to share is authentic leadership, and it's going to be based on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech. I believe that his speech embodied what authentic leadership is. So what is authentic leadership? Authentic leadership involves a lot of different things, but it involves a kind of sincerity, a type of honesty and integrity. Those are some things that are really important when it comes to authentic leadership, which is really great. And it's something that every single person here needs, including myself. I believe that we are all authentic. You've probably heard this before, there's not a person before you, and there's not a person after you that has existed. That means you're pretty original. I said pretty just to be modest, right? You're original. And so being authentic would be important for every single person that can hear my voice today. I'm going to share 3 components of authentic leadership. Number 1, wisdom or knowledge. Another is community, but in context as well. And one could say relationships, but really community in context is what I say. And then also communication. These are the 3 things that involve authentic leadership. Now, someone might say, well, isn't authentic leadership just being yourself, being your raw self, no matter wherever wherever you go? It's just you being you, right? Raw. Well, the one thing that I say to that is the reason why you don't see a lot of speakers publicly sharing in their birthday suit is because that's not what authentic leadership is, okay? Otherwise, because I wasn't born with this suit, right? So should I be wearing something different? No. That's because authentic leadership, it involves a type of wisdom with a context of community, knowing the context that I'm in, and also using that to communicate effectively. By the way, that's what all of us need to do as well. As students, as faculty, as staff, we all need to do that. So that's why, and you're probably happy that I'm dressed up, right? So that's the reason why. Authentic leadership in the way that I'm going to expound is a focus on society as a whole. That's what I believe authentic leadership does. Also, it considers society and its present, past, and future. Also, communication. It communicates with the type of tone of respect and honor and dignity. That's what authentic leadership does. And it involves those other 3 components that I shared as well. There's a type of balance. There's a balance between understanding the individual, myself, who I am, but also understanding the community. And there's not an off balance. I'm not focused too much on myself, and I'm not focused too much just on the community. There's a balance going on here. So I'm going to share about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech and how he embodied that, as I said before. One thing is that he focused on society as a whole. It's interesting to me, in the speech, he never talked about wanting a black president to be in the Oval Office. Nothing wrong with that. And Dr. King never said that he wanted to get in the Oval Office. Matter of fact, he probably knew that being a leader in a movement during that time meant that he might not be around very long. And he knew that. He spoke about that. He shared something different, which is very interesting to me. He said that I can see black boys and black girls, white boys and white girls playing together in harmony. That's really fascinating to me, because he focused on society as a whole and what did society need at this time. The other thing is he focused on the past, present, and future of the big picture. And so, for example, he said in the beginning of the United States, our forefathers, they wrote down some very important things. And they said that we all are born with unalienable rights to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He also said that people are created equal. He shared that context. It was important to share that context when it comes to social justice and where in the United States. He also said in our present day, this isn't the picture that our forefathers had written down, guys. So let's keep each other accountable to having ourselves a present that reflects those principles that we had initially wrote down, that our forefathers wrote down. And then he painted a picture of the future. He painted a picture of the future and what could be possible if we did keep ourselves accountable to the past. So it was like this crockpot version of a speech made for all of us. And crockpot style is much more, there's much more into that than a microwave version, right? So, and I'm gonna share a little bit more about that later. His speech also carried a tone of respect, honor, and dignity. Think about that for a second. Dr. King was wrongfully thrown into prison. He could have considered himself to be a victim. He could have put his head down like a victim. He could have been rude, and reasonably so, right? Because he had been so wrongly treated. People, his friends, family have been wrongly treated. So why was he standing with such poise, with such honor, with such dignity, and sharing this? And by the way, he was also sharing this not only to black people, but white people who were considered by some people back then to be an enemy, but he wasn't talking to them like they were an enemy. I think that's really interesting, right? He was talking with a tone of respect and honor, whether you were different or not, because I believe it's because you were a human being, and that's why. I think this authentic leadership is what we need, especially in issues of social justice. It takes maturity. It takes a type of stance that says, okay, people have their differences, but we really have to sit down and talk together because we have to work together on this. I'm going to do a comparison and contrast of something which most of you, maybe you heard of, maybe you haven't. But there's this word called woke, right? Woke is a vernacular, comes from the word awake. And since the beginning of around the 2000s and the rise of social media, that term has been coined to be a part of a movement related to, well, diversity, equity, inclusion, or social justice. Yet it's had a different kind of development. And I'm going to share my experience as I've researched diversity, equity, inclusion, as I've researched social isolation and loneliness. And we're going to take a look at the effectiveness. Wokeism. There's three components that I've seen. And one of them is that whenever you're watching TV, and you might see on the news a lot things related to wokeism, especially when it comes to society and the news and everything like that. A lot of times when this issue comes up, it's related to if there's a struggle of and a focus on the individual or a particular group, a particular individual or a particular group. And it mainly considers an individual's or a group's past, present, and future. And it's kind of off balance for the most part whenever I have experienced and seen it. So also because of that, there's a disregard for the audience need. There's a disregard of the audience in general because we're focused really on a particular group. You know, an agenda of a particular group instead of the agenda of a human race. And so there's this, what I call the communications disregarded, right? Because I don't care if you understand or not. I'm just going to share what I want to share, and that's it. And so wokeism in context. I've studied social isolation and loneliness. In short, isolation and loneliness has been announced by the U.S. Surgeon General as an epidemic in the United States. And thus, loneliness exasperates a type of narcissism. And when you put social media in the middle of the mix, it can really grow a sense of narcissism, which causes a type of societally with leaders, there can be a type of inverted racism, which I'll share later. And then that causes polarization of societies. So what is polarization of societies? Well, basically, if back in the day, if you wanted to feel like you belonged to a certain group, you could go, there might be a certain town, you know, it would call it XYZ town, and then you could be a part of that and feel good. Now, social media, you don't have to be a part of a town. You can just, the algorithm just confirms your ideas that you may have when you're alone, and you feel like you are self-sustained with either yourself or a group, and therefore, a self-sustained group can become its own country, and we have multiple countries in one country, but that's not what I think we want, and that's not what social justice movements are for. It's for creating a platform in which we can communicate with each other and hear each other, not be our own communities separate from each other. So I'm going to give one example. I have young children right now. I grew up with Disney. If I asked you to raise your hands, you probably know what Disney is and probably grew up with it too. There's something that I noticed, and I'm a Marvel fan too, a Star Wars fan as well. One thing that I started to notice is Disney, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with any kind of movement, anyone that wants to make a difference in social justice. What I'm talking about is effectiveness in communication and making sure that everyone on the table can be heard. So one of the things that I saw is they had a diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, Disney did, but then it turned into something that was more focused on, number one, the individual, a certain individual or a certain group, and raising that individual or that group up. And it may be a minority group. So for example, back in the day, it's kind of funny to me because I'm black, but like back in the day in the 80s and everything, they used to have the horror movies. Guess who died first? Okay, you're right. it was you can guess, black folks. But now it's very interesting because it's inverted. And this is why I call it inverted racism, because racism is either making a party less than or more than other people instead of putting us on the same playing field. So now instead of this minority gender or this minority underserved gender or underserved race being completely disregarded, they're invincible now. They're completely invincible. There's no character build because they don't need to build any character. They don't need to grow. They're self-sustaining within themselves, right? So just look at Star Wars and look at, I love Marvel. Look at Marvel. And number two, there's a context of human experience that is secondary. It's secondary to a particular group or a particular individual's goal or agenda, etc. And there's this type of revenge discrimination. If you haven't heard me say anything else, listen to this, okay? One particular group isn't going to save a whole nation. And one particular group isn't the problem. So for a movie, and I love movies because there's supposed to be a depiction of the human experience. And to give an authentic experience of it, an authentic experience for us and an authentic depiction of the human experience, we have to be authentic. To say that you are a victim is not authentic. Why? Because no matter what you've gone through, this is a fact. I'm going to live and die on this one. No matter what you've gone through, you still have great value. Pause for effect. No matter what you've gone through, you still have amazing value. That's what Dr. King thought. That's why he could, even though he'd gone through everything, he still stood up with poise and with honor because he knew he still had value. He said, don't let anyone tell you you don't have value. So now to show a movie that depicts someone as a victim that needs revenge on a certain group, that's not authentic. Number 3, the audience is disregarded. This one is super funny for me. I kind of make it as something funny. Now, I don't like really any isms, masculism or feminism. None of those isms are good for me, right? I do think some masculine films need some femininity. And I also think some feminine films need a little masculinity. Like we need each other, right? And so I just think it's funny, though, that there's an extreme feminist that was hired to direct a Star Wars film. And, she's angry at the alpha males, right? I just think that's really funny because I'm one of these audience. Who's the audience of Star Wars coming into Star Wars? They're mostly nerds. You're picking on the nerds, right? There's the alpha males aren't there. They're in the sports, right? Taylor Swift got it more right? She's over there with the sports. No, she's not a feminist. But I think that's interesting. It's like being mad at a wolf and then taking it out on a poodle. The poodle's like, I don't like wolves either. Like, why are you taking it out on me? Nerds love everybody, right? That's why they let their movies be completely transformed, because they're like, I just love everybody. I think it's very important for us to consider our audience, but it's hard to do that when you're only focused on yourself or a particular group. I've done the same thing. It's kind of like a microwave version versus a crock pot version that builds a lot of character. Back in the 60s, there's a lot they went through. And I feel like because of social media, we can just jump on and just talk about something and not feel like we really have to go through it. Also, the problem with only focusing on oneself or a particular group is that ships alone will never raise tides. Tides are what always builds and raises up ships, right? The tide builds a ship. A ship can't raise a tide. Us together builds together. That's the way that works. I mean, it's kind of like gravity. You could try to go against gravity, you'd be delusional, right? I had this example myself. Okay, so in some time ago, I applied for the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship. I was very excited. And when I sat down and you had to write an essay, so I wrote my essay and I wrote what I thought I was supposed to write about. I wrote about myself. I wrote about my own problems, my own struggles, the things that I went through, how difficult that was. And now I can relate to Dr. Martin Luther King because I've been through some really hard things. Did you know that I didn't get that scholarship? I don't really know why. The year after, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, and I, with my parents, visited the place where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And I'd never been there before, and it really moved me a lot. After that, I said, I think I'm going to write down what Dr. King went through. And I'm going to write down what he said about social injustice. And then I'm going to think about the people he said he was grateful for that gave him the opportunity to be here today. Did you know that all of us are here because of somebody else before us? And to disregard them, to disregard their past, is not doing it. It's not authentic. It's an injustice in itself. So I wrote about that, and I wrote about my experience and how his experience made what I can do today possible. I mean, even speaking right here in front of you, it still is making it possible. And guess what? I got the scholarship. Isn't that awesome? I got the scholarship because I remembered the community in context. I used some wisdom, and I also communicated in a way, hopefully, that my audience understood. I guess they understood because they gave me the scholarship. So it's important. I mentioned this just earlier. We have to build together. There's something we have to build together. It's not going to take a particular group. A revolution never happens outside. That's why one group can't save all of humanity, right? It has to come from within. That's a principle. And the same thing happened in the United States. Our forefathers didn't just stay in England and say, I'm going to complain at England. They are just horrible. I hate what they're doing. And they were just rude. No, they went and they created something so attractive that even today, I heard on the news, there's a couple people still trying to come in to the United States. Why? Because our forefathers built something that's valuable. And I think that that's something that we can do today. What are you and me going to build together that makes other models look like they're maybe not as attractive for others, but for us, this was something important, right? My wife, she loves Downton Abbey, right? I don't think Downton Abbey needs any Black people in it. I'm as secure as I could be within myself to sit with my wife and watch Downton Abbey, right? What are you going to build that's going to attract people and is going to cause you to stand out as someone authentic? And that's the same question I have for today. Let's build something together. My name is Dr. Jeremy Holloway. Very nice to meet you. Jeremy.Holloway at und.edu. Connect with me. Have a great day. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Dr. Holloway. And then thank you to all of you for coming. Join us next week for a fan favorite geography professor, Dr. Douglas Munski. Have a great rest of your week.